Our first speaker to open proceedings today, Steve Powell, is from Market Check. I had the privilege to go down to Melbourne there a couple of weeks ago and listen to Stephen. And when he jumped up, he didn't look old enough to have a driver's licence. And anyway, I was a bit concerned, and I thought, but he knows his stuff. So he's he's here today, and he's an independent economist for Market Check, and he's going to give us a little heads up on world grain markets and where we sit in the world today. Thanks, Steve.
Thought I might just mention, Evan, this is actually water I've got in this glass here. I'll probably just start by introducing our company. Some of you might know of us, and others wouldn't. We're an independent grain marketing advisory company, and Brett Stevenson, who's the owner of our company, has been around for many years, travelling around, helping growers cope with the situation of deregulated wheat market. What I'm going to be talking about today is about what the markets are doing at the moment and the outlook over the next into the harvest. So I'm just going to begin with a bit of a recap on last harvest and some of the issues that were faced then, and also just talk a little bit about determining fair value and the importance of growers in understanding what fair value means and what their grain should be, the value of their grain versus the international market. As I said, I'll be speaking about the outlook in 2011, 2012, and some of the key issues for both the domestic market and the international market. And also, I'm just going to speak about protein premiums and our expectations going forward. In 2010-11 harvest, leading up to harvest, we had a very volatile offshore market, and at the same time, good growing season weather, and that lasted until harvest, where the continued rainfall led to widespread downgrading of the crops across the eastern seaboard. We had holding of grade spreads right up until December that surprised us in our office to see those spreads holding, despite talking to our growers, where they were telling us each week, they were talking in inches of how many inches of rain they'd had each week, and we were quite surprised by that. In the end, it was a nightmare harvest, as I probably don't need to remind you all, and at the same time we had a blowing out of grade spreads. Just to begin, most of you are aware of the domestic market follows very closely. It's closely correlated with the Chicago wheat futures market. The Chicago market's the benchmark for global wheat prices, and domestic, the US being a major exporter, similarly to Australia, the prices that the Chicago market represents are that export market, and generally speaking, our prices are closely correlated to that market. So just to have a quick recap of last year, we had the offshore market rallying during winter. Don't know if you'll be able to see this from here, or if my accuracy... You can see as we got to the beginning of July, around about 20 million tonnes was wiped off the global balance sheet due to drought conditions in Russia. And Russia subsequently banned grain exports at that time, and we had the market rally very strongly at that point in time. Then the market fell away coming into November and had a second rally with support from US corn prices and tight feed grain stocks internationally. Since then, we've had a two-legged fall, and now we sit at relatively low levels than we've seen over the past 6 months. At the beginning, I'll just flick back here. At the beginning of 2009, we had a very leading into the very volatile market, we had a pretty choppy market that just kind of was chopping around 200, 240 previously to the sharp rally. I guess going back to what I want to speak about to do with fair value, it's important for growers to understand that as part of a grain marketing strategy, it's good to know where your grain stands and if domestic prices represent the international market. This graph here just represents domestic prices. As you can see, they were well correlated going into that the earlier rally, and then we see domestic prices at that time with negative basis. The basis is the difference between the international price and domestic port prices, and I've just got Melbourne APW here. And as you can see, the APW price tracked along fairly well, leading up until about August, and it's a pretty typical year for forward prices. We had softer forward prices relative to that international market, and then leading further into the year, it wasn't really until December where we saw the spreads for APW really blow out due to fears from both the domestic trade and that we wouldn't be able to supply those milling grades due to continued rainfall. Part of our strategy at Market Check is looking at relative prices, and generally we feel that a good marketing strategy revolves around a general rule. And when I say a general rule, it won't always achieve you the highest price. Our strategy isn't to pick the international market, but it revolves around the idea of selling physical when basis is weak is not a good strategy. It's better to sell physical when basis is strong. As you can see here, APW basis leading into pretty much all the way until September was fairly weak, and it wasn't until we had those spreads blow out in December that we really saw strong basis for APW. Looking at the feed market, it's a totally different story. We had relatively firm basis in those earlier months, and as I said before, it was very surprising to see that stay the case until December. During December, we had a rally in the international market here, and at the same time, we had domestic prices fall away. And that's generally to do with, firstly, how much feed grains there were out there, the supply of feed grains, and also that there was a lack of buying interest amongst the trade at that time, and there was a lot of feed out there being sold, not just both by the grower but also by the trade. As you can see here, we had weak basis, and at this stage, it was apparent to us that this kind of depression of basis at this time isn't a sustainable thing.